Hello, Jianhan. Thank you for coming on to the show. I read that you have a unique talent with card tricks. Can you tell us about your interest in that and how it actually intersect with your professional life in any way?
There's a mall along Kovan called Heartland Mall. Then me and my group of friends, 4 or 5 of us, we will tend to walk past to go to this food shop. And in between this food shop, there's this magic card store on the top floor. Then we walk past and we see, okay, what do they do? Then we walk past, there's this guy inside, he said, hey, do you want to see some magic tricks? Okay, being students, we are like, oh, okay, we go something so different. And then we said, hey, if you want to learn, then he started to tell us, yeah, you can learn, but it's for a fee. All of us started to pool our pocket money together for one person to go in to go and learn. And then it's quite private. So there's this curtain where he does the trick. He teaches you, you need to go behind this curtain to learn. So I think I try to apply what I do for magic in what I do for workspaces. To some extent, it's always nice to come to an office and feel like, wow, this space is something different.
You started in finance professionally before transition to what you're currently doing, workspace strategy. What inspired this shift? Do you think your background in finance actually influenced the way you approach workplace design?
I started my career in probably known as the Big Four, right? PwC, Deloitte. Then when I was in Deloitte, when I was doing M&A, right, we come across analyzing different companies, right, on their profitability. Then we realized that real estate is a large part, right? And one of the projects that I did was analysis of this F&B company, right, this retail stores. Right, so what we have done was a same store analysis, right? Meaning that I want to compare an outlet, an F&B outlet in, for example, a Heartland versus an F&B, a similar F&B outlet in CBD. Right? What we realized from this analysis is that although certain stores, right, they might be located at a central location, highest footfall, right, but it's still not performing maybe as well as a store located in a less desirable location. Right? So only then when we headed down to visit the different stores, we realized that actually design plays a large part. So again, it's within this that I realized that there are so many factors that cannot really be quantified on the book. Right? We can't really measure this, but so impactful on profitability on this particular store.
What are some of your, I would say, professional pet peeve lah? Basically, workspace design mistakes that you keep seeing people repeating over and over and over again, and which are, in fact, if they know a little bit more, a simple fix that they could actually work on.
For me, it's how they start. Right? So there are many different phases of I would say a property life cycle, right? Of let's say we are analyzing which property we should go in, what kind of offices are we looking at, right? And then to the design. So I think most companies that we go for is they really made the decision to either locate to this particular building, right, without consulting their employees first. Right. So then when they engage us or when we approach them, it's a bit of a constraint, right? For example, if your headcount is 500 people, right, but you are going into an office space for only 300 people, and then you are kind of forced to make it work. Right? So I need to employ a high degree of desk sharing, right? So what many people term as hot desking, without even consulting staff. So I think it can be the same journey, right? So for example, company A decides to go into an office space for 300 people, right? Coming from an office of 500 people, compared to company B doing the same thing, but engaging staff first. Right? So they engage their staff, they find that, okay, we are going ahead with this because of these reasons, right? So I feel that many organizations fail to engage their employees at the start, right, leading to playing catch up towards the end, right, explaining why we did this, right, not rather than going back to say we are doing this because of what you said.
Wouldn't planning by consensus slow down the entire process? And how practical is it to cater to the whims and fancies of every single employee? Because everyone will want things that work for them. And what if that actually creates some kind of internal conflict that may overlap and contradict?
In most cases, we want to engage staff, but again, we do not want to over-engage to the point that there's so many conflicting opinions, right? Even without going to all staff, right, going at a leadership level, even within management, there might be different consensus to what might work, right, and what will not work. So what we try to do is to really tease out the functional requirements, right? Because design and how we feel can be very subjective, right? Based on our own experience. So as much as possible, we try to contextualize it to functional requirements, such as the things that I do on a daily basis, what's required for me to be productive at my work, right? And also from a management point of view, like how do we see collaboration going forward? Right? Do we really need that much collaboration for our business, right? Or do we want to use the change in workplace to set a new culture, right, for the business? These are some, I would say, key questions that we need to consider, right? Rather than looking at the next new thing where we see articles or a new office, right, for someone else, right? That might work for other companies, but it might not work for our case.
Are there any aspect where a lousy or poorly designed workspace may hinder work in itself as well as well-being?
Maybe we redefine what's a poorly designed workspace, right? I define it as a place where I can't perform my best work, right? So if I'm in a function, for example, HR, right? For me, I might not have my confidential or private needs catered for. Right? I'm sitting out in the open where the office can be very nice. Right? It can be the best office with everything that I want, right? But if it fails to solve my issue of being in HR, needing confidentiality and needing that privacy, people can see my screen, I'm doing payroll, then it impacts my behavior with the office. Right? I would see myself going to work from home a lot more, right? Even if we see that everyone's very satisfied in the office, but for me, in my case, it doesn't cater to my job requirement, my role, right? So that impacts me to work from home a lot more. Right? I might just stop a meeting room for the entire day, right? Because I need that privacy. I'm speaking with potential candidate, right? So I guess it's really subjective. So again, back to the point of why we always need to engage employees before we design a workspace, right? Rather than another way around. I think most companies do it another way around where we design a workspace. Then we say, hey, these are meeting rooms that you can use for. We have X number of meeting rooms of different sizes. We have new workstations. We have a barista. We have a cafe. Right? So feel free to use them.
In Singapore, there's an announcement about this flexible workplace arrangement thing. How do you see this impacting businesses, employees, and of course, workspace specifically? Because that would also bring about a very different approach to how company were to utilize the space, especially in a very expensive real estate market like Singapore.
The rollout is very in line with where we're trying to hit toward. I saw that there are three main categories, right? First is flexi location, which I feel that many companies are already doing that. We are working from home, working from our office, working from third spaces. So I think most companies have no trouble adopting that or are already adopting that to a very large extent. I think the two other factors are a bit more different, right? So one is flexi time arrangement. So flexi time can mean part-time arrangement, can mean staggered hours. It can also mean the hot topic of a 4-day work week, right? Compressed hours. So I think that is quite new to most of us. And we are still trying to figure out as employees and employers what's the best approach, right? Because from employer standpoint, I wouldn't want my productivity or operations to be compromised, right? At the same time, I would try to cater to what my employees want. Okay. Then the third point is also on the flexi load arrangement. So that refers to a bit more of HR, right? Job sharing, right? What's the nature of the job scope that can be combined and rolled up into one role but shared among multiple people, right? For example. So all these factors I would think would define how we approach a workspace. Right. So for example, if we are doing a flexi time arrangement where we are working 4 to 4.5 days a week, right? If from a real estate standpoint, if my office is going to be occupied only 4 days a week, so what do I do with the additional one day of the week not being utilized? And should I balance it out so that I maintain occupancy levels throughout the week? Right? I do staggered arrangement for my team, or do I even explore the possibility of even renting out my office on that particular one day? Right? In a very extreme example. Right? So, and this just for applying to a smaller setup. Imagine if a large company with 1,000 of employees, right, are doing this on a large level. A 4-day work week might mean that the office is utilized at maximum 80%, right, throughout the week. Meaning that obviously not directly translating to a lower footprint, right, directly reducing 20%, right, but it might really change how we we operate the workplace, right? It changes how we design the workspace, right? Since it's only operational for days.
So in current context, when it comes to workspace design, are there any unique element, especially given, I guess, our climate, our geography, more so our climate, lah, given how hot things are recently, that you believe companies should really start paying more attention to?
Singapore is a bit unique, right, comparing to other regions, right? I think for us, the commute time isn't as bad, right? So when we try to mandate returns to the office, for example, right, we see that in Singapore, the take-up rate is much higher compared to regions like Malaysia, Indonesia, where all of us can spend 1 to 2 hours in traffic, and it's very normal, right? For us, Singapore, half an hour to 45 minutes feels like quite a bit, right, or normal.
Already complain.
Yeah, so many of us are already complaining. So I think attracting people back isn't a key issue, right? It's rather what we put within the office, right, to future-proof. Right? So I think there are different ways that we try to help our clients, right? Companies to future-proof their office by, first of all, designing the workspace, right, in terms of the layout.
Mm.
So what we find that it's more of a behavioral issue that impacts the return to work is, if I'm coming into office, imagine me coming in on a Monday or on a Friday where it tends to be slightly lower, right? Then that will set me thinking that, hey, why am I coming back when there's no one back? Right? So for example, let's say a head count of 100 people in the office. Usually on Mondays we 20, maybe 30 people. So imagine you step in and see only 5 people spread across different clusters. I think you feel that, why am I coming back? Because most of us, when we come back for meetings, we come back to interact rather than sitting down at our desk through the entire day. So that will set me to the behavior of, if Mondays are always like that, I will not come back on a Monday. So there are times where we see that Mondays have a what we call a death spiral effect, right? Only 5 to 10% of right. Then you start to peak out during Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Then towards Friday again is the team effect. So we try to achieve I would say a sense of buzz in the office, right, without being too empty, by trying to design pockets of different spaces, right? Meaning that instead of stepping into the office, you see a sea of workstation, we deliberately either we build up rooms in the center, right, or we locate some of the discussion pod, right, so that it feels a bit like a maze. So once you step in, you see, hey, there's a small cluster of people there. There's another hidden cluster behind, right? So it doesn't feel too, I would say, too empty, right? You can still feel a sense of buzz, even though there are low occupancy days, right? And by doing this, you actually locate those meeting areas, right, closer to the workstation area, right? So it goes. So this is quite controversial, right? It goes against some design principles where in terms of design, we try to locate all our meeting areas, all the build-up areas close to the core area, right? So imagine a rectangular layout. Your lift lobby is on the right side. Usually you want to introduce a lot of natural light into the workspace. You locate all your workstations at the window area, right? But by doing this, you are instead locating maybe meeting areas around the windows, which breaks up the natural light. But by doing this, you give more buzz to the office, right? A bit more hidden. When you step deeper, there's another quiet space. When you step a little bit further, you can see a quiet pod, for example. Right? So I think design is one way we try to challenge the issue or tackle the issue of low occupancy. Second is, I think, quite common. All of us say food brings us together. So many companies, they try to do drinks on Fridays, breakfast on Mondays. Just try to bring people back. It doesn't have to be a very expensive affair. It can just be a simple fruit basket, right, on certain days, just to attract people back. And then when I come in, it's a subtle form of positive reinforcement. I come in on Monday, I see there's a banana or a yogurt there. Then Monday seems quite fun in the.
I like the fact that it is the workspace is done deliberately so that the sense of emptiness is not so prevalent. I guess that is where your magic tricks background come into play. Trying to create a veil of illusion. I personally have been on the receiving end of going to office and seeing all the empty desks on a Monday, which made me second guess, did I come in on a public holiday? But it's not. People are just not coming in on a Monday, which I guess is quite common. And of course, to that notion, there are also many workspaces that try to do, I would say maybe a few years ago, that would probably be the right kind of things that people are expecting, the foosball table, the ping pong table, this and that. I remember many years ago, I saw an article in the Straits Times. They were profiling a call center, Singtel call center. And the interesting feature piece about this is they actually have a carousel in the middle of a call center. And I showed it to my friend. My friend was working in StarHub. I was telling him, hey, you should consider joining them. There's a carousel there. But he also pointed out something which I found quite enlightening. He was telling me, you think people dare to use me? You literally put yourself in the spotlight if you are seen sitting on the carousel. But I'm digressing here. What are your personal thoughts on this when a workspace try to encompass too much? We talk about work, life, play, which I think was one of the slogan for Buona Vista One North when they first started. Do you think these spaces truly enhance employee well-being?
I think there's too much expectations of a workplace. Like you mentioned, work, live, and play. I would say it's almost impossible to achieve that because for us at work, right, we are always at a mindset of we need to rush deadline. Right, we are here to get things done. Right. Whereas the flip side is introducing a live play environment where you introduce sleeping pods, right, for some. You introduce massage chair. Right? Even though it's there, like you said, it's really a white elephant, right? No one really dares to use it, right, in the workspace. It feels very weird to have my manager working so hard, rushing for a report, and there in her massage chair or the net room just like, okay, I need my decompress time. I think it's also a mindset change that's required. I'm not saying that it's possible, but it's about the culture that enables that. So large companies like Google, the tech companies, Meta, they all have these facilities in-house because they do have that scale. Right? If the company has that scale and volume to develop a campus, right, then I would say, yes, it's possible because you are more than an office. Right? You provide gym, provide food, and your employees embrace the office to a different mindset, right? Where I socialize, I interact. So it's not just a place for work. It's like what you mentioned, work, live, and play. But in general, although when we do engage users up front, we do a voting exercise where they get to choose what kind of setting they like. There's also this wildcard idea where they can introduce sleeping pods, napping pods, massage chair. Often you'll be surprised that all these are highly voted by employees. Then I'll ask them saying that, okay, imagine now we have this in the office over there. We can pilot this. Would you use it? And they say, oh, maybe not actually. It's good to have, but it's good that we really like it to be in office, but most of the time it's not really being used a lot.
For companies right now who may be on the lookout for new workspace, are there any top of mind tips or advice that you'd like to give to them when they go about shopping for a new workspace? What are some of the, I know it's very hard to quantify because different company may have different requirement, whether they are trying to look at a research facility versus an office. Let's just start with an office, a typical corporate service environment. What are some of the key principles that you believe would apply across to most people looking around for a new office facility?
I think a key theme is efficiency, right? So as you're looking out for an office, you want to find the best bang for buck that you can get, right? Location aside, right? Price aside, we see that most tenants, they are going for quality fit out, quality buildings, right? The reason why they go for quality buildings is although you are paying slightly more for rent, right, for a higher grade building, you have a more efficient space, right? Meaning that typically all these buildings are what we call grade A building. They tend to come with lots of tenant facility, right? So for example, there might be a end of trip facility downstairs where your employees can cycle to work, they can park their bike, a shower facility. Second is also there are usually co-working operators within your building, right? Meaning that if you have a huge expansion in headcount and you've signed a lease for 3 years, you can still rent out additional space from the co-working operators. So that gives you an element of, I think, a bit of flexibility when you future-proof your headcount. And another part is also these buildings tend to come with large meeting room spaces, located on the building itself. So as a tenant, I don't have to build because if I think about 50 pax meeting room for a town hall setting, or 100 pack meeting room. These are maybe used 3-4 times a year, right? For your quarterly town hall, or your all hands meeting. Right? So instead of building it in-house, which very expensive to build, expensive to maintain, and to pay for such a large footprint, right? These are located within that building. Right? So building selection is very key. We see that as a general trend towards quality fit-out spaces. I think second is, it's also hand in hand with this higher quality buildings. We see that these quality buildings have a higher, what we call larger floor plates, right? Meaning that we have, instead of locating across multiple floors in a building, for example, now I am taking up 5 floors, right, of 10,000 each, right, 50,000 in total. Locating to a new footprint, right, maybe I just take up 2 floors, right? Although those 2 floors can be only 20,000 each, right, my net reduction in space might be from 50,000 to 40,000. But if we look at efficiency, I can still build the same amount of meeting spaces, amount of desks in a smaller setup, right? Because I don't have to replicate, for example, your facility room, your storeroom, your pantries across 5 floors, right? Maybe I just have 1 or 2 across these 2 floors, right? So this allows some savings in terms of space, right? Savings in terms of cost. And then I think last tip would be creating modular space settings. So what I mean by that is to develop spaces that can be modular. So for example, if I develop an office, right, this office is the same size, right, same footprint as a 4-person meeting room. And this footprint can also be the same size as a open collaboration space, right? Or if I want to break it down, this similar footprint can be located for 2 focus rooms, right? So by using this modular approach to space planning, right, in case of I need more meeting rooms in future, I can just change the furniture inside the office, right, rather than tearing down walls, right, erecting new walls, right, building new things inside. So these are, I would say, the 3 key tips, right, when we look out for space and we try to make it more flexible, more future-proof.
But that also sounds to me like the older building will always be at a disadvantage, right? Because of how they were being constructed decades ago. Some of the buildings come to mind, I guess Shenton House with a very, very different kind of look and feel compared to, say, Capitol Green, I think, or Capitol Spring, if I remember the name. So does it mean that those are the kind of buildings everyone, or rather maybe I should put it more positively, under what circumstance would a company then want to look at the kind of buildings that may not fit into the criteria that you just mentioned?
I would say cost is usually the biggest driver, right? So usually the older buildings tend to be more competitive, right, in terms of cost, right? Although their location tend to be much more central than the newer buildings you mentioned, right? So some of these buildings are located just beside the MRT station, right? However, it's not so efficient, right? So again, if money is not an issue, right, we would see that most tenants tend to go towards newer building, right? Especially in the financial and legal sector, right, where prestige, or being in a new building is a big driver, right? They host clients, right? The older buildings would attract different form of tenants, right? For example, the tenant type that we see for older building might be family offices that need a local presence, right? But might not need such a front of house setup to host clients. Right? For example, we also see HR companies located in a very central location, right? But maybe there's no need to be located in the top class building, so to speak. So again, it's really different, right? But I think cost is the main consideration.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show to share with us your thoughts about workspace design. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners as well as viewers?
The best time is now, right, to really redesign the workspace. We see empower, right, so to call, from employers to employee. Right? Because now as a potential employee or as a existing employee, it's very easy for me to compare across different sectors, right? Of saying that, hey, this competitor is actually offering so much better perks, right? So, and their culture is so much better. So what would a company what would a company create to ensure that I'm sticky as an employee? So I think now is where employers are starting to listen to employees in terms of what they want, right? How
Mm.
we can enable employees to be most productive at work. And this is very different from the past, right? Maybe not even 50 years ago, like 10 to 20 years ago. It's very different, right? It's like the mindset is you're employed, come in to do the work, right? Do your work and then go. Whereas now I can see that the shift in perspective is from the employees is I want to create a very productive environment for you, right? To grow here, right? And it's also same across the board. So I think it's good that many large companies are really taking a step to introduce flexibility, right? And now the SMEs, smaller factors are also taking this up, right? Plus, at the end of the year, come December, there will be the launch of flexible work arrangement where it's mandatory to have a process in place. And so it's great to see this happening in Singapore.
Workspace design could potentially, in fact, definitely could be one of the key differentiation factor for companies as well. Over and above, of course, salary benefits is how you can really attract and also retain your employees. For people who may be keen to learn more about yourself as well as what you do, where can they go to?
You can head to Unispace, search any of us. You can hit my LinkedIn profile, right, just below.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Thanks, Adrian.